Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to Resiliency. I'm Jacqueline Hollows and I'm just acting as a panel coordinator on this group. And I've got 4 beautiful panel members with me, and they're all going to introduce themselves and tell their stories. But we've all talked together, and we really want to hear from you as well and make this interactive. So after we've told their stories, we'll turn it over to you and see if there's any questions, including from the Zoom people, and we'll go from there. We'll see what happens. So we have until 5 o'clock. Yeah. And so first of all, it's Audrey.
Hi, can you hear me? It's on there, okay. I just want you to know I have my coat on because I've been very cold, all right? I'm from New York. I moved to Florida. I love the warmth and sunshine of Florida. And to me, it's freezing cold here. So I'm still trying to adjust. Anyway, resilience. Well, I don't have to introduce myself again because I spoke about myself. But when it comes to resilience, I can appreciate that word. And the 3 Ps, my understanding of the 3 Ps helped me to realize the power of my resilience and everyone's resilience. I always thought of myself as a pretty strong person. I was always very happy and, you know, I had a positive outlook on life and things were going well until my 19-year-old granddaughter committed suicide. I can't even begin to explain how I was feeling. And not only was I tremendously disturbed for myself, that's not even the right word, but not only was I traumatized myself, I was also concerned about my daughter, her daughter. And I was miserable. I was really, really unhappy. I've never been that unhappy and miserable in my life. Now, I'd known about the 3 Ps prior to that, but I didn't really appreciate my understanding and the power of thought until that situation happened. And I remember I would ask questions like, well, my granddaughter moved to Florida. She was from New York too, and she moved to Florida partially to be close to me. We were very close. And we'd go to breakfast and lunch together because I was retired, so I worked around her schedule. And she only lived about 15 minutes away from me. And I remember when her mom called me from New York, screaming into the phone, saying, Mommy, Ty is dead. My granddaughter's name was Ty. And I was like, what are you talking? We just had lunch yesterday. What do you mean? And she's screaming into the phone because the authorities in Florida, when they identified the next of kin, they told her mother. And I was in shock. I didn't, what? What do you mean? I just saw her yesterday. So that whole experience, throughout that whole experience, I kept asking myself questions. What happened? Why did she do that? Why didn't she talk to me? Maybe I could have seen what was bothering her. Why? How? This and that. And of course, I was driving myself crazy with questions that I could not answer, but that was part of my grief process. And then I was filled with trauma for my daughter. How can I help her? What can I do? How can I help her? Well, I had to help myself first, but I wasn't aware of that. when I connected with the 3Ps, I wrote a blog. I reached out to Center for Sustainable Change, and I wrote a blog about my experience with the trauma and how my understanding of the 3Ps helped me to heal and to feel better, to get in touch with my inner health and wellness, and to let it go. Now, when I think about her, I will still feel a pain in my chest, but I mean, this might sound cold, but we all die. We all go move on. I don't see death as the end, but we all move on. And Jeanne Catherine had me share my story also on the podcast. And I did not even see it that much as resilience until she brought it to my attention. And I realized, wow, okay, this is amazing. It's amazing, you know, so I feel very liberated. My daughter is doing so much better because I just listened to her. I didn't tell her ways to feel better. I learned through the 3Ps. Just listen. Just listen. She will come to her own wisdom. She will come to her own health. And she did. She and her husband were able to go on a very popular New York radio station and talk about how they worked through the trauma. She has written a book about Ty and as being a mother, and she's in a better place. I mean, she's in a better place than she was before. And I didn't mention resilience to her yet, but eventually I will. But, maybe she did tell me the other day that she feels much better. She doesn't feel like she felt 2 years ago. So, and my voice, in my mind, I'm saying, and that's resilience. No, just listen, just listen. So resilience is amazing. And when I was in touch with it, I realized there's nothing. I felt that, but sometimes when you have a situation that's emotionally devastating, you think, or at least I thought, I'll never get over this. I will never get through this experience. I will never. I would pass stores where Ty used to work. I can't go in there. I can't go in that store because she used to work there. I can't go over here because that's where we ate together. But that's gone now. I'm finished.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go later so everyone has time. Thank you.
Everyone did notice this is not called the uplifting path. No, I'm joking. Because I'm gonna talk about death too. No, there's great hope. I just had to choose a little.
I'm fine though. I'm good.
No. So the beginning of our stories are pretty similar. Things were pretty easy. Not a big, traumatic childhood or anything like that. And I'm gonna pause myself for 1 second. I forget, we do have a couple of people that are new to the principals in the room, right? We have a few people that are new. Okay. So the only reason I wanted to mention that, so in this case, sometimes when I talk about what I'm going to talk about, I cry, sometimes I don't, sometimes, it comes back in many different ways. And for those of you that are new, because you might not see this yet, I just want you to know that while that's going through me, I am so totally okay. So whatever outward emotion you're seeing, and to me that was one of the real blessings of having this understanding, that no matter how upset I was in the moment, that it passes through. It's no longer stuck. So I just wanted to say that before I go on with my story. But so everything was hunky-dory, and I was in Massachusetts where I live, and I got a call one afternoon from my brother who lives in Colorado, and he said, Christy, he's like, Dad had a heart attack and he's in the hospital. And I said, oh my gosh, really? He said, yeah. And so he told me the story of how it came about. My dad didn't even know he was having a heart attack, but a family friend called my brother, who happens to be an EMT. He was like, and she said, I think you really need to go check on your dad. So he went, hooked him up to the equipment, and he was having a heart attack right then. So they put him in the ambulance, took him. And I was like, okay, well, I'll get a plane ticket and I'll come out. So I got out there, and they got a stint in, and everything was supposedly fine. The surgery was successful, everything was fine. And so I spent a couple days with him in the hospital. We brought him home on Saturday, and Sunday the whole family came to the house, and we had this really nice day together. It was like the best I'd seen him the whole week. It was lovely. We were kind of already planning his therapy. We were like, oh, we'll do physical therapy. And I got him an iPod so he could listen to some audiobooks. I'm like, you'll love these stories. These are really great. And so at night, he was lying in the lazy boy in the living room, and I said goodnight to him and gave him a kiss on the cheek. Love you, Dad. And he said, I love you too. Thank you so much for coming out to be with me. I said, of course. And the next morning I got up and said goodbye to my stepmom. I'm like, I'm off to get a manicure, see you later. And I was 3 minutes from the house, and she called me up, and she's like, Christy, she's like, my dad had gone down for a nap earlier. She's like, Christy, I think your dad's dead. And I was like, really? So I immediately called my brother, who was working that morning, and I'm like, you've got to get over to Dad's. You've got to get over to Dad's. Karen thinks he's dead. And before I knew it, I'm driving 74 in a 35, and I'm like, okay, take the foot off the gas. And I got up to the house, and I couldn't even park the car. I was half on the curb and half off and stalled, and the fire truck and everyone was there, and I went running into the house and got into my dad's bedroom, and my brother and all the firefighters were already there, and my dad was on the bed, and the funny thing is, because you think you should see something, you do. I would have sworn the covers were moving up and down, and my brother said, he's gone. And I just fell into my brother's arms. And, I'd always been Daddy's girl, so to run in and have that so unexpected. So then I had to call my husband and let him know what had happened. My dad was 64, by the way. He was young. And I told my husband, I'm like, my father was a dentist, and he was the sole owner of the practice. So there was no one to take care of his business. And I knew that was the main asset. And I knew that I was executor of the will. And we'll just take a step backwards 2 weeks before this all happened. I was at home, and I was just going around doing my normal stuff. And I was like, I think I'll clean out my cookbooks. That was like very random thing to do. It did not fit in with what I really needed to be doing. But I went and started cleaning out my cookbooks. And there in the back of one of my recipe binders was this piece of paper my dad had given me 6 years earlier with all of his will information, the lawyer's information, everything I needed, what he thought the business was worth, who I should call if I needed to sell the business. The sheet of paper that I knew that I had but had no clue. I was like, it kind of passed my mind now, and I'm like, oh, I wonder where that piece of paper went. And there I found it in my cookbooks, of all places. I never, ever would have looked there if I'd needed to look there. So I asked my husband, I'm like, can you please take a picture of that paper and send it to me? And I said, I don't know how long we're going to be here. I'm going to have to stay here in Colorado. I said, will you please pack up the kids, pack up our camping equipment, and drive to Colorado? So that was on a Monday. He did that. He spent all day Tuesday packing up, got everyone ready. No one had time to say goodbye to anyone. They just hopped in the car and started driving. And that night, my dad liked Josh Groban. So I put on my Josh Groban, and I literally cried myself to sleep. And then when I was so tired I couldn't cry and I went to sleep, I'd wake up and then start crying again. And despite that, I'd never felt that sad in my life. Despite that, there was that little tiny piece inside of me from knowing what I know and knowing where my experience was coming from and knowing that I'm innately well. There was that little piece inside of me that was like, you're okay. I could still hear that through all the stuff I was feeling. I was like, you're okay. And I got up the next morning and I went to the lawyer's office and we went to the mortuary and we set up all the arrangements. I went into his office. Now, he had 7 employees. One of them had been with us for 31 years. He'd only been in practice for 34 years. She was like part of our family. And so I walk in and of course it's a small town. So he's on like the 4th generation of some of these, like people that he treated as children, and now their kids are coming in. And so we started calling patients, and we didn't know what we were going to do. We knew that they couldn't come in, but we didn't know what was going to happen. And so we decided that I talked to them. They decided they wanted to keep working there if they could. So in the midst of doing funeral arrangements and all of those things that you have to take care of, I had to send out a letter to 1,300 patients letting them know what was happening. My brother came in with me and left a message on the business answering machine letting people know what was going on. And so all during that week, I had to go and I had to hire dentists. I had to make plans. I had to make sure we didn't lose any patients. I had to go and find someone that could sell the business. And then I got in there and I started looking through the books and through all the financials. And between the savings account in the business, savings and spending account, I didn't have enough money to make payroll that week. So now I truly had no idea. I mean, talk about having to sit in the unknown. I had no idea. It was moment by moment. It was the unknown without the choice of being in the unknown. It was the unknown because there was no other place in the world to be. And because of this understanding, I could be in that place and still make decisions and still function and still be sad when I was sad and not sad when I wasn't, and move through all of that. And so I won't bore you with all of the business logistics and flip-flopping and everything that came up through all of that. But I will say that this understanding helped me manage that time with so much more grace than I ever think would have been possible, because I think that I was able to do it without freaking out most days. Not every day. I had my freak out days, that's for certain. And and in the midst of all this, my 2 children who had been just uprooted from their home were camping in a tent in my brother's yard. Because my sister-in-law was concerned about disrupting their routine, because they of course had stuff they had to get done too, and this was difficult for them. So my kids don't have their bedroom, they don't have anything. They're used to being with me, and instead they're with whoever random person we could find to help take care of them, or coming into the office or whatever. I had dentists that didn't get along. One patient would see one dentist and he'd be like, oh yeah, we need to do this work, and they'd come in for the work and the other dentist would be like, no, I'm not doing that work. And we had insurance issues and we had to rebill a whole month of insurance, and people were getting letters saying things weren't covered. So anyway, that's a small little fraction of all the things that came up. But so we were there for 5 months, and in the end we ended up selling the practice for full price to a dentist who was absolutely lovely, and who kept all the staff, kept all their benefits, kept everything. And we only lost 2 patients during the whole entire time. Yeah, it was really powerful. It was really, really amazing. So that was, for me, really seeing the principles in action. Like, just, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Gosh, you made me cry. I was like, I'm going to hold it together. No, I'm not going to cry. And here it is. But so are you up for another story? Great. So my name is Dorothy Martin, and I'm a coach and trainer. And I work with individuals and also organizations. And my thing is about helping people see that, you know, maybe burnout is not necessary and actually navigate through life in a way that they don't encounter burnout. And if they do, they'll see it for what it is. And really to help people flourish, you know, help people just live the full life. And, you know, I always wanted to live the full life. And I was this person that was very keen to do well. And I thought, I've got this life, I'm just going to do everything I can to have a good one. And I had a vision how this good life should look like. And you know, when I kind of look back, I can see that I lived, I often say, like a racehorse, because I was really kind of like going for it. I thought I need to do everything to get there. And I had this like a self-care routine that I've developed, and they were all evidence-based. It's like I did exercise, and I did meditation, and I ate well, and I even had like a time scheduled for social contact, because, you know, the evidence says that you should have that. And it's like, that's, you know, I'm doing so well. I'm doing everything I can. And then it was in February 2014. Actually, it was Valentine's Day. My boyfriend moved out, and I also was realizing that my last promotion was just not what I wanted. It was not what I envisaged, and I was in my new role literally for probably 2 months, and I was like, that's just not what I wanted to do. So I remember when he moved out, he kind of took all the furniture because it was his. So I was sitting in my flat, empty flat, and I was just like, my thoughts were echoing, and it was so loud, and it was like, what is going on? You know, what is going on? I've been putting so much effort into making my life work, literally, and it just doesn't work. And it was just really tough, because I found myself in this situation again and again, and it was just another time. And I thought, I didn't know what the answer was, but there was this deep question, what is going on? And I also looked at other people, and I thought, how these people are, what do they do? They seem like they have good lives, you know, they fulfilled, and what's wrong with me? What is wrong with me? And at first, it was funny. The next day, I went to the hairdresser, and I thought, oh, I'm going to have a new haircut, and everything's going to be fine. And, you know, I'm just going to, and then I thought, I'm going to just double up on my self-care routine. I thought, I'm going to do more exercise, I'm going to eat even better, and everything is going to be fine. But it wasn't. And you know, I was basically, as you can imagine, I was just paddling so hard. I was really paddling to keep myself afloat on the metaphorical ocean of my life, and my legs just going crazy underneath, but I couldn't do it. And I started to just drown, literally. It was just like the heaviness, I couldn't shake, and nothing was helping me. nothing was helping me. I was spiraling down in the darkness of the ocean. I felt I was drowning, and there was just no way out for me. I felt like I've tried everything. I studied psychology, I went and had therapy, and I had these evidence-based things that I knew I needed to do, and nothing was helping me. And I thought, I've utilized everything. There is nothing else that I can do. And I got to a point that I was really depressed, really exhausted, and I couldn't get out of bed. And then at one of those days when I woke up and I thought, oh, I don't really want to be awake. I want to go back to sleep. I thought that would be a really good idea to make myself really tired. And I thought, oh, I'll just grab a book and I read probably a few pages and I fall asleep again. And the book I found was the Jack Pransky book, Somebody Should Have Told Us. And I think probably the title, I don't know, but I was quite cynical. Actually, I know everything, you know, I've done everything, but I'll read it for a little while. I'll read it. But I kept reading it. It was quite interesting for me because for a few months I was completely switched off, and I started worrying that I started losing my cognitive abilities as well. I couldn't concentrate. I started losing my confidence. I've always been a passionate person. I completely lost my passion. It was just like the heaviness was everywhere. And suddenly I remember I was sitting in my bed and I was reading this book. I was just like, I was already excited. I thought, oh my God, I'm reading this book. And I came to one of the last chapters when he probably when you've read the book, there's these diagrams that he draws. And literally there, it's like he says that we experience life through our thoughts. We don't experience it, directly. And it was just like something hit me in my head, and I was sitting in my bed and thinking, is this what is happening to me right now? Is this where my, depression and exhaustion is coming? From my thinking about myself, from my thinking about my life, and my thinking about, how bad people in my life were, rather than my life itself. And it was like the energy just took me out of bed, and I remember just like pacing out in the room. I was like, what is going on? And I had this, it was like I had this vision that I was drowning in the ocean, and suddenly I saw myself that I was just like, I was holding those bricks. I was holding the heavy bricks that were my thoughts about my life, people in my life, about myself. And suddenly, like my hands opened literally, and those bricks just floated away. And then even it's just like I went into this crazy vision that they turned into balloons. It's just like there's nothing. It's just nothing. And in this moment, I felt just like the buoyancy of the ocean just pulling me up. It's just like some kind of hands of God. I don't know what it was. I felt that instead of going down, I started going up. And, I knew that I was kind of being returned to the surface. It was such a amazing experience that I remember next day when I woke up, I remember that my appetite started to return. And I, for a long time, I just wasn't hungry. I didn't want to eat. It was just, everything was a bother. And the first thing I noticed is like, oh my gosh, my appetite is starting to return. And I felt like I wanted to go and buy some nice food. And another thing is like, I wanted to text people. I wanted to text my sister, and I wanted to text my ex-boyfriend. And I haven't spoken with him for absolute months. And I sent him actually a lot of abusive messages. And I've called him names and everything. And suddenly I have this feeling, I want to text him. And it was just so weird for me that I was just in this, I don't know, the feeling. And I texted him, and I said to my sister, it was December when I was going through this, reading the book. It was just before Christmas. And I said to my sister, I want to come and spend Christmas with you. a week before I said that I'm not coming to her ever again, you know. And then, you know, I felt like I wanted to buy a new dress. So everything started coming back. This natural energy started coming back on its own without me doing anything to get it back. It's just this realization that I was holding back on this negative thinking about myself and my life and people. You know, made this in a way that breaks disappears. And I realized that there was just nothing wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with my life. And there was nothing wrong with people in my life. And from there, my life just unfolded in such a completely different way, effortless way, just true unfolding. And I can only tell you that I've just celebrated my first year anniversary with the guy who's left and we are having the most amazing relationship that I could have never imagined. You know, when he left because he said, it just doesn't work. We had those arguments that were going on and on and on. And I had this huge anger. And he said, look, I have this vision that we are this cool couple, that we never argue. And I thought, you are in a dream world. How do you mean we don't argue? The couples argue. That's normal, you know, and you have to argue and stuff. And it's really weird, but we have in these relationships, like his prophecy is fulfilling because we don't even argue, you know. And literally, I look back and like you said, that is like, how did it all happen? I've left my work and I've created the business, and everything is unfolding in this kind of gentle and beautiful way. And sometimes I forget it as well, and I go into crazy mode. Yeah, I have them, but there's so much rare. That's how I found that, you know, the resilience is not in doing, but in being. And if we realize and we touch the space underneath our thoughts, the magic happens. So thank you so much for listening. Wow. It's been lovely. Thank you.
I don't know if I can follow these beautiful women. Now I don't know what to say. No, I'm kidding. I know what to say. So my name is Amanda, and I am a coach and artist and lover of the principles, and I'll tell you why. Because I had bulimia and anorexia for 24 years until I came across the principles. So in those 24 years, I did psychotherapy, I did cognitive behavioral therapy, I did tapping, meditation, yoga, everything. I had the most wonderful, loving therapists ever, but they didn't know about thought. So they didn't direct me towards thought. So they told me about, well, when you feel like binging and purging, I want you to take a shower. I want you to go on a walk. I want you to write in your journal. I don't want to do that. I want to binge and purge because I don't feel good and I want to feel better. And my brain has told me that signal, she doesn't feel good. This is what makes her feel better. This is what has worked in the past. So I'm going to send out that signal. So I'm now getting that signal, and that's what I want to do. I don't want to take a walk. So, but I didn't know that, and neither did they. Totally innocent. So what happened was I was a dancer in New York City. I danced at NYU and graduated and started my own company. And I had this amazing life on the outside, and I felt like I want to be that girl. Look at this life she's living. It was very bizarre. I was envious of my own life because inside it didn't feel like it looked. So I spiraled down, and I still tried to, meditate and fix it and fix it and fix it. And why am I doing this? And what is wrong with me? And why can't I eat like regular people? Why can't I lose weight? Why do I feel like this? And what is wrong with me? So I went into therapy even more deeper, even more inpatient and every day. And just the problem was right here, and I was staring at the problem. So there's a problem here. There's a problem. It's still there. Yeah, it's still there. Okay. And that's what therapy was like for me. Every week or twice a week, let's look at the problem and talk about it. Okay. What's different today with this problem? Well, that never worked because there was no problem. There was thought. There was invisible thought that I never saw, and neither did anybody else, because they couldn't point me towards it because they couldn't see it either. So what I realized about 2012, 2013, when I came across the principles, that I had been innocently pinning my self-worth and my well-being onto an outside circumstance, and that outside circumstance was my body. So my body, I never realized that was part of the outside in understanding, that I was also outside. It wasn't just circumstances and other people. It was me too, my form, my body. And I had, if I was okay, if I weighed a certain weight, if I was, it never worked because it wasn't true. That's why it didn't work. That's why the therapy and the affirmations never worked, because it was, I saw myself in a globe, a snow globe. I was inside the snow globe, and I had Post-it notes of affirmations all inside this. It was decorated very beautifully, but I was still in the snow globe, and I didn't know. Nobody else did, until broke through, because I saw thought. I saw what I was doing. I saw that it was all innocent layer upon layer upon layer of thought that I didn't know was thought. And the awakening was, there was a couple big ones, and it's generally just slow realizations over and over, and I'm still waking up. And I think everybody here can agree that it never stops. You never stop seeing things about your journey and everything. So I think that's all that's coming out right now. Well, questions? Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Hey, Carla Royal wants to know where you live, Audrey.
Me.
Like
Oh.
what part of Florida?
Now I'm living in Kissimmee, which is near Orlando. I lived prior to that in Sarasota. And I moved from New York first to Sarasota, and now I'm living in Kissimmee, which is near Orlando.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
my name is Audrey Garcia Grice. I'm also known as Sadna.
I'm Christine Higgins.
My name is Dorothy Martin.
I'm Amanda Jones.
I'm Jacqueline Hollows. I think I said that. Anybody else have any questions or anything they want to share? While you contemplate that, I'll just say that thank you so much, all of you, for your story, a little bit of your story. What I really noticed about all of those stories was was first of all how different, how you can have 4 different stories or 10 or 100, but it all shows up in the same way, like insight or wisdom or natural moving towards health or whatever you want to call it, shows up completely tailor-made and bespoke for you in the moment that you need it. And you could hear that in those stories. So I really loved that, the sort of differences and then the sameness, that it doesn't matter what you throw at this, it's the same. And the other thing that I really loved that you really came out loud and clear was that you don't do the 3 principles. You are them. We are all innate health. We are all wisdom. We are all thriving human beings that have a thinking experience of life. And that the possibility of fresh thought is there in any moment and always waiting to pop up. And that you can spend months. Who's to say that you weren't meant to spend months in misery? You know that that's the right amount of time for you to have in misery. That something about that time meant that then you got out of your own way. And it can be a week, it can be months, it can be years for some people, but it's all perfect. And the more we look in that direction of perfection, the more we realize, get less concerned about our individual experience in the moment. I really loved that you highlighted that.
And if I can just say, I was joking about this not being the uplifting track. However, this is the first time I've heard these stories. And all I can say, it's so hopeful to know these things that would normally bring a person to their knees and maybe be devastating, and to hear the resiliency. And yeah, so I love that.
Okay. I just want to say also that the hope part of this is huge, because I never thought I would speak about this, what I went through, in public, let alone on Jeanne Catherine's radio show and a book, because, or to other people that were suffering, because I thought I'd be triggered. And that I found out wasn't true. There's no such thing as triggers. Isn't that a relief? Oh my God. Now you can actually go out in the world and not be afraid of being attacked by some thought, right? So the hope and the resiliency to me is hope. But I realize that resiliency isn't just after a traumatizing episode, but it's moment to moment. We get to hit the refresh button. Well, we don't do it. The energy of mind hits the refresh button, and we continuously bounce and are resilient in every single moment. There's nothing that's static. There's no body image that you have to attain or accept. An image is a made-up concept. It's static. It doesn't exist. So the hope is something that I am a big fan of. I think everybody here would agree to that.
Yeah. Do you have some questions? Questions. Let's give them a chance. Okay. Oh.
Well, I'm just curious. I've been learning about the principles for about a year now, and I'm not really that young anymore, and I've always been a seeker. The Eastern thoughts and religions helped me a lot when I got to about my 40s, and that's been very helpful for the past few years. But when I started reading about this a year ago, it was just like, wow, it was kind of sudden. I'd never heard of it before. And I just come back from a Eckhart Tolle week in Costa Rica, been dealing with kind of an ongoing depression for a couple years, which has been lifting this year, which I'm grateful for. And I decided to go to Costa Rica. I wasn't a big fan of Eckhart Tolle, but I liked him. And after I was there, I came home and I thought it was really nice being with all these great people from all around the world and hearing these things about being in the present moment. And I need to do more of that, to read more about how to be in the present moment. So I was looking, and I'd already looked, I have all these Buddhist books and stuff. And so I thought, well, let's get some latest videos or something, see what can help kind of regenerate me again. And I was coming up with the return. I don't know what I put in the search engine. I can't remember, but it was coming up with stuff about the 3 principles. So I thought, what the heck is this? So as soon as I started reading about it, it was really interesting. And I really kind of pursued that quite vigorously. But so anytime I'm around people now, I'm just so fascinated to hear about how you first heard about it. If it was like gradually, I mean, mine was just like, wow, I've never heard of this before. So I'm really curious about that. If anybody wants to share that.
Oh. Thank you. Similar to what you said, I'm in my 60s, and I've done a lot of seeking, looking outside for ways to feel better inside. And I remember when I would go to the library or the bookstore, I'd go to the self-improvement section. And I've read tons of books that were very uplifting and very helpful. I've done meditation, I've studied Buddhism and Hinduism, so many, and I have a great respect for them all. But it wasn't getting to the core. You know, there was something missing. And what grabbed me about the 3 principles is the power of thought. Because the other principles I pretty much understood and felt comfortable with. But the power of thought and the nature of thought was amazing when I got in touch with that wisdom, and how I was able to work through not just my granddaughter's death, but another example is I love books. And when I moved from New York to Sarasota, I got rid of most of my books. I always have my books with me, but I don't need them anymore. I mean, I started collecting more about the 3 principles now, but just to remind me, but I have that wisdom. I don't need to go outside to get it. And being in touch with that, it's like a reminder, you know, reminder, there's another word I use, but it's reconnection, getting back in touch, restoring what was there, remembering, because we forget, we get caught up in life. And the older I am, the more life experiences I've had. But I'm in such a calm place now. I feel it's amazing. I'm in a really calm place, and that helped me a lot.
So we have a question about how Amanda found out.
Very good. Very good.
Okay, I'm going to be brutally honest. Let's see. I did a Google search for how to stop throwing up your food. And a woman named Dr. Amy Johnson popped up. This was back before she was principles, specifically principles teachings. But the way she spoke kind of sounded different than I had ever heard other people speak about innate health and well-being. Like she said, "There's nothing wrong with you. You don't have a problem." That sounded good to me. So moving forward, I kind of followed her, and she started to really zone in on the principles. And so I Googled the principles, and I thought, ugh, this is another woo-woo bullshit cult. And I've done it all. I'm tired. What is this? So I let it go for a few months. But it kept coming back, and things I would read, and Amy would post things and share different Michael Neal's work and Jack Pransky and everything. So it kept coming back, and I was like, okay, I'll look again. And then I reconnected, dove in head first, and never looked back. So I would say it was, I have no idea how I came across it. It was just one night, and it just kept knocking on the door and saying, hello, I'm right here. Can you just listen? Because this is the truth. I'll keep knocking until you finally listen. So that's how. And now Amy and I are partners in her little School of Big Change, which, talk to me if you are interested in that, because enrollment closes on Monday, and it's amazing.
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 I can say amazing like this.
Here's a question.
What's the question?
The question was how did the three principles come into your life? Dorothy, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, for me it was through the book of Jack Pransky. It's just reading his book, and it is a funny story actually, because a few months ago when I was getting depressed, it was kind of from February to December, I was kind of going down, and somewhere in the summer, my sister actually said, oh, there's this book of Michael Neal, Inside Out Revolution. Yeah, I think it was. So I've read that, and I thought, oh, that's very good. But but he was saying that we don't need to do anything. We are already well. And I was like, no, yeah, you are so wrong. And I wanted to email him, say, how can a coach like this, international coach, say to people, you don't have to do anything, you're already well? I was like, you have to do. I said, look at my list, eating, meditating, and all this, you have to do everything. And I didn't, because I was really depressed. So I thought I just didn't have, energy to do it. But I was feeling angry with him. I thought this is a wrong type of advice. And then before Christmas in December, I was literally like lying in bed and browsing through my iPad, because I've had the book there. And I went through into the reading list at the end, and I was just browsing through the reading list, because he gives the resources at the end of his book, and I was just browsing, and I thought, oh, maybe I just pick something, and and I was just not thinking anything of this book, of Michael Neal's book. And this title popped up. Somebody should have told us. I don't know. I really felt, feeling was I was a bit cynical, but I thought, oh, probably I'm just going to read a few pages and go to sleep again, which is exactly what I wanted to do. That's how I found the book. And then it all started for me from there. And of course, I've then listened to a lot of teachers and Deacon Batchinger, and that's how I found Jeanne, Catherine, and the conversation continued, and the conversation continues for me, and that's how it all happened.
So for me, I had been working as an imaging scientist at Polaroid, and they were doing a knowledge transfer program between the engineering and marketing, because believe it or not, they have troubles communicating sometimes. And so they were doing NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And I got interested in that and had been following Michael Neal, because that's the path he had been on. And so I'd purchased most of his things, and then he was coming out with this new book, Inside Out Revolution. So I pre-ordered it, and it came, and I was just flipping through the first pages, and I was like, this is really different. This isn't what he's normally doing. And I just ate it all up, and it was like, wow, it was just mind blowing to me. And I got a little bit curious, but I probably wouldn't have done too much more. I was like, it just really made sense to me that I was experiencing my thinking. That was the piece that really, I was like, wow, that's so different from, the rest of how people are operating. And then my son, a couple months after that, who was about 10, said to me, he's like, Mom, if I can just tell every single person in the world to believe in themselves, then everything would be okay. Oh. And I was like, oh, that sounds like innate well-being to me. And so he saw something. And so then I started looking for a coach for him, actually. And Jack Pransky is kind of nearby to us. And so I got a hold of Jack. He put us in touch with a coach that works with children. And so, yeah, that's how I ended up here. And it's been learning ever since.
I'll be quick. I did not say how I got in touch with the 3 Ps. I just said that the power of thought is what captured me. But of course, as a book fanatic. And I often still do listen to Hay House Radio. So, Hay House. And one night I was listening to it, and I heard Michael Neal talking about the Inside Out Revolution. And I enjoyed listening to him, but understand, I taught in the university around all these academic people. And there was something very intellectual about what he was presenting, which caught my attention. And of course, me being a researcher, I said, well, what is he talking about? And where did he get this from? What does he mean, inside out? So I started searching, and eventually Sid Banks' name came up. And then I read his books, of course. And then I started reading everything I could find about the 3 principles. And Elsie Spittle, I could name the Pransky, I could tell you all the names. And then I went to YouTube. And then I went to podcasts. And then I discovered Jeanne's podcast. And that's what led me to, then my granddaughter passed. And then I went to Center for Sustainable Health. I mean, I keep saying health because it's about innate health, but it's for sustainable change. Because I wanted to connect. And that's what it's about. So I answered the question now. I answered the question completely. Oh.
I've already got one. Can I tell you a story about one of our guys who, how did he find the principles? Came to class, and I always like to know, why did you come? What are you here for? And sometimes they get referred, and sometimes they say things like, well, all these men keep coming out of your class looking happy, so I want some of that. Anyway, and they call it the glow. Anyway, this one guy, we eventually asked, he said, well, he sort of moved into the prison and he decided that the cell wasn't clean enough, so he started cleaning the cell, and he got up on top of the cabinet and cleaned the top of the cabinet, and on top of the cabinet was a book, Dear Liza. So he read Dear Liza. It made sense, which is a Sid Banks book. Made sense to him, and then he heard that we were teaching the 3 principles in prison, and he couldn't believe it, so he turned up to class. That's quite a good story. Any more questions?
Well, as usual, I have one more comment. Blah, 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 blah.
Do you have a question now? I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Quick, someone ask a question.
Yeah.
I love the way this seems to be exploding. One person and there's a revolution and so forth. And my funny story is the woman who introduced me to it, I said, we went to lunch and everything. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm pretty familiar with most of those enlightened thoughts. I've done this. and rattled off all the stuff. And then one day she said another sentence to me, and I was just eat up with all the books I could read, you know, because she said, you know, there really is a sun up there and there really is blue sky up there, despite what you think. And so it got me. But besides that, I'm wondering, how do we make this exponentially outgrow us? How can we make this outgrow our stories and our conference and our little room of people nodding and all saying, me too, me too? What do we do?
By growing it from within and you first, and then the way you show up to the barista at Starbucks, to the person who bags your groceries. That's how it's got to start there. Exponentially it grows. There's no. I was just going to expound on that.
Well, I do remember meeting a woman at a wedding this summer, and she said, oh, how are you? I met you last year, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really remember her, and she remembered me. And I said, so how's your year been? And she's, oh, and she just began to whine and fuss and grouse about her job. And I don't know where this came from, except it gives me goosebumps to think about what I did. She's just, you know, she can't retire yet. She's working, la, 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 la. And I said, what's all this suffering for? I don't know where that, I mean, I kind of know where that came from, but what's all this suffering came from? I had to say it twice. And she looked at me, and I swear you watched years drop from her face as she lit up. I have no idea what her name is. I know she'll be at the next wedding, maybe, but I don't know where I said that from, but it was like the lady at the bag, you know, doing your bags, or the barrister, or whatever.
And can I, yeah, can I just add something to that as well? Is that absolutely right, and that's proof of it. And I think it was said this morning, and you may not have been in the room when it was said, but one of the things is that there isn't a time limit, or there's no expiry date. We just do what we do, and it will grow, and people will learn, and people get impacted, and people might not even know it's the 3 principles. That woman doesn't, but she knows she feels better.
We listened to Jacqueline's story last night, but I want to know how you know about the 3 principles.
Wow.
There seems to be some magic in that moment. Everyone's looking for.
So when I had this, I had this moment in 2010 where I thought, I've been in IT all my life, I've been made redundant. I realized that I actually didn't like being in IT, that it was just something that I'd done, I'd fallen into it, and all my education experience was in that. But what I did like was people. So that's when I went to Mike O'Neill's Super Coach to retrain as a life coach. And at the time, he was integrating NLP with the 3 principles, so he wasn't fully turned over yet. And I went there. It's a really good question, actually, that you asked, because I'm going to tell you the end before I carry on, is that I really see that everything we do is the purpose. You know, there's no need to search for purpose. We're already on purpose, and everything we do leads to the next thing we do, and we might not know that that's the case, but that's what happens. So I just thought about joining Super Coach. It seemed sexy and fun and exciting to travel to LA 6 times and, you know, meet all these people from around the world, and that was it really. And if I was going to be a coach at the end, like, great, but you know, I didn't really care if I was or not. And I went along, and I had an amazing time. It was an amazing journey, and I loved the first weekend. And the second weekend was George and Linda Pranksky, and everybody told us, "Oh, it's so amazing," and you know, all these things. All these Americans told me that. And anyway, flew into LA, and a group of us went to see George and Linda speaking at an event before the weekend that we were going to have, because they was, you know, they loved them so much. And I guess I was jet lagged, so this is my excuse. And so I went to this event, and I think it was in a church hall. And George and Linda Pranksky, if anybody's seen them, they sit at the front in the easy chairs, and it's all a chat. And Linda, God bless her, looks completely miserable, and George is just bumbling, and I'm sitting there thinking, who are these people? And looking around the room, and people going. I thought, it's a cult. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go to sleep. So I went to sleep. And so the next day was the weekend, which was George and Linda Pransky. And George came and he told this to me, rambling, bumbling story about gut feeling. And he went on, and I just thought, this is terrible. I kept looking around, and everybody's like this. There's something wrong with this. Just horrible. And on the first weekend, I'd had I was abused when I was a child. And on the first weekend, we had this amazing teacher who stood there and told me that I was loved. And all the shame of that abuse fell away from me in that moment. And so I'd had this amazing experience the first weekend, where the first time in my life I felt worthy. So I was so excited for this second weekend, and I'm sitting there in the second weekend, and I'm just really not enjoying it. And every time I wanted to ask a question, I felt anxious and scared, and I didn't want to ask a question, and I just did not understand my experience. It was just horrible, and I couldn't wait for it to end. Unfortunately, because Michael Neal hadn't transitioned, or that's not the right word, is it? Moved over to the Free Principles. We had then loads of other different things after that, and there was less. But there were a number of things. So first of all, we had to read books to go on the weekend. So I had to read The Enlightened Gardener, The Missing Link, and Relationship Handbook, and Somebody Should Have Told Us. And I hated all of them. And I thought Sid Banks was a misogynist. So, you know, I'm painting the picture. I really, really didn't like it at all. So as part of our coach training, we had, this is how I remember it anyway, people who there might tell it differently, but we had webinars and ongoing masterclasses, and there was a masterclass with George Pranksky. And you couldn't pass your coaching qualification without attending, and, you know. So I'm at work, I've got a project going on in Wales, and I thought, well, I'll attend. And then when everybody gets going, I'll play hooky, right? You know I'm good at that. So I go online, and there's me, my friend Mary Beth, who lives in Spain, the facilitator, and George. That's it. No one else turned up. So I couldn't escape. So I just put it on mute and carried on working. And they were all waxing lyrical about Sid Banks and the Free Principles and everything. I was thinking, all right, yeah. Anyway, great, good for you. George Pranksky then says, Jacqueline. Oh, what did I mean? What do you make of it? And I thought, oh, well, I don't want to be rude, but I don't want to be dishonest. So I just said, well, actually, George, you know, I don't want to be rude, but I don't like it. And he really laughed like you. I really laughed. And I thought, that's weird. And he said, tell me more. And I said, well, I had this terrible experience, and I was feeling like this, and I couldn't ask a question, and you told this story, and he just kept laughing, saying, wow, that's so interesting, tell me more. And I don't really know, you know, but the conversation went on for some time. But because he was so relaxed about the fact that I didn't like it, and he had nothing on it, you know, he clearly just wasn't trying to convert me or anything. It piqued my interest, and I just thought, oh, well, maybe I'll have another look. So I did have another look, and I saw it then as a bit, you know, harmless. Like there's some, they're nice people, and they're harmless, really. They mean well. So I had less antagonism towards the whole thing, and so on. And sometimes when I was coaching, because at this point then I'm sort of being a life coach, if you like, and if nothing else worked, I'd say, have you tried the 3 principles? You know, so it'd be my last resort. And I didn't know, I don't know what insights I had. I didn't know I'd been impacted, but as I shared yesterday, you know, my life got very, very difficult for a period of time, but also seemed a lot more simpler. And actually met and fell in love with my husband a year later, and we had all that going on too. But how did I get impacted was through working with the people that I work with, because they were the principles. I saw it in them. I saw how thought was creating their reality. I saw how beautiful and amazing they were, and they didn't know it. I saw their souls. I saw that me too. And they taught me the principle.
I'm Sandy Johnson. I'm from Charlotte, and I'm on the board of the Center for Sustainable Change. I just wanted to address the issue of communicating the principles and spreading the word that you brought up, Pam. That's what we do. We're interested in spreading the word of the principles into community in a lot of different ways. Initially, Roger Mills, our founder, wanted to bring the principles into at-risk communities around the country, such as Modelo. Some of you may have heard of that piece of work, that book that Jack Pransky wrote about Roger's experience in Miami-Dade County in the 90s. And, but what we have put together now for programming to enhance the spread of the principles across the world is virtual programming for people. We have a number of different tracks that people can pursue. We have webinars monthly, topic-based, that occur for a couple of hours, 1 day a week, with the topics changing every month. We have something called the Collaborative Associates, where people who know the principles can share the principles in the community that they live, or with an organization whose objective could be enhanced by having their clients exposed to the principles. And so we provide a team of support for people and other people who want to spread the principles in their community. A place to go, to strategize, to plan, to get feedback, and to try to create the movement of the principles into organizations where people could benefit. You know, in some ways, this is, you know, you can give money to an organization, and we're a great organization to do that too. But the other thing you can do is share the gift of the principles that you have with people and organizations who need it. And so the structure that we have put together helps people do that. And you're welcome to visit our website and learn more about it. But I just wanted you to know there was somebody out there that had an organized and effective way of spreading the principles around the world. And we have participants from countries other than the United States. And our numbers are growing. We began this programming in January, and it's taking off like a rocket. And so I just, www.centerforsustainablechange.org. So we are a nonprofit, and we were it really is the legacy organization of Dr. Roger Mills from California. And so we are excited to continue his work.
You know, one of the biggest problems with nonprofits is they don't have board members who are involved. So give Sandy a round of applause for being involved. Thank you.
For the lady at the end, Amanda, when did you realize, and how did the realization come that you didn't need to, binge and purge anymore to feel good?
All right, calm down, calm down.
So this is key. The behavior that we engage in, be it binge and purge, shopping, gambling, sex addict, whatever, anything, the behavior is not the problem. It's the solution. It's the solution to not understanding what thought is. If I have a bad, uncomfortable feeling, and I don't want to feel like that, I'm going to be inclined to do something to change that. And my particular flavor was the eating disorder. So when I realized and learned through the principles and understanding how I created my experience from thought, not me, but the principle of thought, I still engaged in the behaviors for a while as I was gaining insight into the principles and how life actually works and how it's experienced through me. But I didn't care because I knew under the surface change was happening. So if I was still engaging in the behaviors, it wasn't a problem anymore. And since it wasn't a problem anymore, they slowly dissolved and stopped eventually. I didn't have to do anything.
Wow.
No willpower, no effort. Because it's coming from underneath. The change is deep and real. I wasn't putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. I was healing from the inside. And it's effortless when you know. Does that answer?
And I just want to add to that, if it's okay. I was a big time binge eater for a long time, yo-yo dieter, like crazy, and it's what I do now as a coach. I couldn't tell you who told me this, but they said this is your mind's only way to comfort you. It's the only way you know right now. And when they said that, I was like, oh, I'm not bad. I'm not wrong. I'm not worthless because I'm doing this, right? Something's not wrong with me. And I wish I knew who said that to me, honestly. Like, they changed my life with those words. And once I realized that, I didn't know what the principles were for like another 3 years, maybe. Slowly, I stopped. And people are like, how do you stop? I'm like, no idea. I'll figure it out and I'll tell you though, you know?
That's a key thing when you're dealing with behaviors, especially with physical behaviors like binging and purging or starving, is you want to stop the behavior because it's kind of a problem. I mean, it's not pleasant. But you can't look there for change because it's already happened. You look before the behavior. You look to the energy that's creating the bad feelings, and you learn to recognize them as normal human feelings. Every feeling is human and normal and fleeting. I often talk about all human feelings are normal because they're human. They're not like, there's no Martian people here, I don't think. Maybe there are with Martian feelings. Like, what are those? So when you make your experience okay, problems aren't problems anymore. But you're not making them okay. It's through understanding how it works. And it only works one way. And that's what the principles tell us and show us.
There's also when you work in institutions or organisations that are used to looking at behaviours, as we are in the criminal justice system, you come up against people feeling frustrated because you're not dealing with violence, you're not dealing with drug taking, you're not dealing with addiction, you're not dealing with any of those things. You're looking at what's right and what's healthy and so on. And so people on our programs will, often relapse, so they stop being violent, and then they'll have an episode, or they stop doing what they do, and then they do it again. And the other providers will come to me and say, "Oh, look, this is a problem. They're doing that again." So in a way, our job, if you choose to work in those areas, is also to gently train those people too, because they just don't know. They're so used to looking at behaviour as a problem, and we know that it naturally changes from within. So yeah, just if you come up against that, then don't worry. Just be gentle with them. They're human too. They're innocent.
And there is also that, we kind of label very often the feeling also as negative or not. And I remember before I had my realization and recovered from depression, I've been feeling similar, not ever as deeply depressed, but I was going through. I've had anxiety. I've had a social anxiety as well. Depression. I went through kind of low mood for a time, and I always thought that that was wrong. I thought it was wrong, and it basically meant that was something wrong with me, and what I needed to do, I needed to go and fix me, basically do something to not to have those feelings anymore. And I thought, if I get myself to not to have those feelings anymore, then I'm well. That's how I thought. And I guess through this understanding, I understood that those feelings are just coming from my thoughts, and it's just a human thing, and we all have it. It's like when then you start talking to people, we all had low mood, we all felt anxiety, we all basically feel it, and there is no way not to feel it. And once you know it, where it's coming from, and that you are well, I kind of like relax into it, and more kind of meeting it with understanding. Is like, I'm feeling low today, and it's just so helpful that you don't have to run to the therapist and kind of review on your life stories and stuff. That it's just what's happening in the moment. It's just what's happening in the moment. It's just this energy is flowing through you, and you meet it, you let it flow through you, and there is this buoyancy of life. And it seems like when we know it, we are returned. When we know it, we are returned every time. So yeah.
Just wanted to say a little bit more about that, only because it's such an important point, because I think someone spoke about it yesterday, that once you learn that your feelings are coming from your thoughts, it's very easy to fall into trying to change your thoughts, which we know doesn't work. No, not useful. And I've just really been appreciating the impersonal nature of thought. Like, try to stop a thought before it comes into your head. I can't. Or try to keep it there, or try to do. Oh, yeah. And so for me, it was incredibly helpful to see, like, I can't even help what pops into my head. I have zero control whatsoever. Whatever's going to pop up is going to pop up. And for all of us, for everyone, it's an endless popping. And the less, it just becomes a lot less about, feeling badly about yourself for having that thought or anything else, because you have no control. So why feel bad about something you have no control over?
What's really cool as well is that it's really helpful to look in this direction, and you can see that we've all been impacted, and we've all learned about it, and we work in it, and all of those things. but it's happening anyway to everyone anyway already. So if you don't understand what it means, or you don't understand what's going on, or you never look at another three principles thing again, that's okay. You don't have to understand it. It doesn't matter. It's working anyway. It's working within us all the time anyway. And I really appreciated what you said about how to share it, but I also really know that you can share it by just making a loving meal and being present with your children and being present with your pets and your family, and the barista, and you know, and anyone that you come into contact, just being in your own life and being happy in your own life. People who are already like that know that other people gravitate to you, and other people sort of say, "I always feel calm around you," or "I love the way you listen to me," or, you know. So we don't have to all go out there and be practitioners, because guess what? You know, there's going to be not enough room. So we can just be. And if you go back into your businesses and your lives with a little bit more understanding of how the mind works, or how the psychological system works, or just how you feel better, then everybody gets a little bit of that. It gets shared naturally. I think we're at the end.
Thank you, everybody, very much.
Resiliency.
Yeah.